All right. Happy Wednesday. Okay, so happy Wednesday. You always seem to be getting the days of the week. Okay, so greetings from Rock and Sky, and today I want to talk a little bit about something which I think gets immensely neglected, and it's a thing called a geological map. So when I was doing geography at school, I never ever saw a geological map. And then I went to university to study geology. And my goodness me, but were there geological maps everywhere. And I think the first one was probably the small scale, when I say small scale, but large geological map of Southern Africa or South Africa. There were 4 sheets, and it gives an overview. And in fact, it tells a 3.5 billion year story. So I've got here in front of me, and it's going to be a bit noisy now, but I'm going to lift this map up and show you this old faithful. So I use this map, I wouldn't say every day, but 2 or 3 times a week. And as you can see, it says Durban. And I've got a confession to make because I borrowed it from what was then the University of Natal Geology Department. And there's a stamp on here somewhere that says, oh, there it is, right next to it. It says Durban, University of Natal, and I promised to return it. I think I was setting out on some honors project, and I needed the map, and so I never returned it. And this is a lifetime ago, so I'm sure they've forgiven me. In fact, they've probably not realized or haven't noticed that it was missing. But I am confessing my sins. So this is an old lady, and look at her. She's bashed around. She's been living inside my truck. They now digitized all of these things, so they are available digitally. But a geological map is indeed a wonderful thing. And so if you live in KZN, I'll send you one of these things with all the geology or little descriptions of the geology and what actually went on. So here was glaciation, and here was volcanoes, and here were dinosaurs, and so it goes. So here were volcanic eruptions. So if you want that, just DM me and I'll let you know. No, Nhlantla, you can't come in. No, go away. I'm coming now. I'm making a video. Always someone showing up when you least expect it. So this is my geological map, This old lady. I better start looking after it. And in that is a story, certainly from KwaZulu-Natal, of 1.1 billion years. And so there's a geological column here, starting with the oldest rocks at the bottom and the youngest rocks at the top. So it goes from 1.1 billion years. Let's get this thing out of the way. I must move this thing out of the way. So it goes on a journey from 1.1 billion years to very recent 10,000 years. So that's a massive story. So why am I telling you this? Because it's strange that they don't talk about this in the geography classes, because they're fundamental. And if you're a geographer or an engineer or a geologist or a mining engineer, rock engineer, an environmentalist, did I say that? An environmentalist, it doesn't matter who you happen to be. A geological map is almost the most fundamental thing you can look at. So the surveyors go out and map all the topography and the rivers and the towns and everything else, and then onto that map gets put the geology. Although the father of South African geology, Alexander du Toit, managed to map almost all of Southern Africa or South Africa on his own, and in some instances he didn't actually have a base map, a topographical map to put his information on. So he had to make his own maps. So, on that note, one of the electives that we did back at university was surveying, and part of that included making maps. So that was a very enlightening course. And so geologists need to know how to make a map, and so do geographers. And geography is all about spatial data and the like, but a geological map is a very special kind of map, because obviously it shows where all the different rock formations are, and their contacts, and then things like faults and mines and the dip of the strata. So it's fundamental in terms of planning. If you need to plan a road, you need to know what materials the road is traversing and not so much where the faults are. That's probably more a hydrogeological thing when you're trying to site boreholes. But yeah, if you're putting in infrastructure, you need to know what the geology is, because all the different geological formations have their own particular characteristics. And you know, the Natal group sandstone, as it's called, is like a hard quartzitic, a hard rock which forms all the high plateau around Durban. And inland, the granites in the Valley of 1,000 Hills and all the valleys, Umzimkhulu, Umkamas, Tugela, they have their own particular characteristics. The Tillite, the Dwight-Tillite, which is all glacial deposits, they also have their own characteristics in terms of foundations and slope stability and all that kind of stuff. So a geological map is a fundamental thing, and I think they should all be introduced to the classroom, and the kids get an understanding of the importance of these kinds of things. And also, in many instances, you know, when you read about insequent, or you learn about insequent and obsequent and subsequent streams and all that stream order, but no one's really, they kind of allude to it in some ways. But like, for instance, down in the Cape there, it's the Cape Fold Belt, so all those different mountain ranges with beautiful names like Outeniqua, and the Swartberg and the Langeberg. They are in the Fold Mountains, and the drainage is controlled very, very much by what the geologists call the structure, so the folding and the faulting, of which there's no shortage down there, I can assure you. That's why it's a fold belt. Those mountains are 10 times older than the Alps, and they were as high. And since then they've been eroded down. But the point is, the flow, the direction of the streams is very much controlled by, or the drainage patterns are very much controlled by the underlying geology. So I think it's fundamental that this stuff is introduced to the students, to the scholars, to the learners. And so it was a bit of an indictment when I landed up at university and I saw a geological map for the first time. So do us a favor, do me a favor, do yourself a favor, and try and get the geological map of the area in which you're teaching, and start talking about the geology and the faults and the folds and maybe their fossils, who knows, you know, the 1.1 billion year old rocks that go back to when the earth was young, all this kind of stuff. So I would encourage you to do that. And if you're here in KZN, send me a DM and I'll send you a little map showing all the different, like a little cartoon, little labels showing, as I mentioned earlier, where the volcanoes took place and where the glacial deposits were deposited and all of that kind of stuff. In fact, we can do that for the entire country. So we can take little excerpts of the geological map and we can populate them and send them to you. And I think that would be a fantastic thing to try and bring this geology and geography to life even more than what you are already trying to do. All right, so on that high note, I will say goodbye. So have a grand day there, and and please don't forget to subscribe and share and like, and of course leave your comments, because that gives me a greater insight into what's resonating with you and which direction we need to go in terms of these little videos. Okay, so I'm out of here. You take care, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye.